Hello, Wisconsin, and hello, Jane Matnair.
Hello, my friend.
I was so looking forward to seeing you in person today and giving you a big hug because I've missed you so much.
Oh, thank you. I missed you.
And then, lo and behold, last night you shot me a text saying, well, we're ripping up the studio, so you probably should do the show from home. So I have not gotten to embrace. You look very tan, though. I can see you on the live stream, and you look like you got some color.
We did. We got some sun. It was not terribly warm, which made me happy, actually.
Okay.
It wasn't 90, it was like mid 70s and partly cloudy, but and in that kind of climate, you still, we did a lot of walking. We were outside all the time. So I wore 50 SPF
Good.
just in case anybody's wondering. So don't yell at me.
Do you have a big floppy hat that you wear as well?
I
I
did
feel
not take I did not
okay.
take a big floppy hat. I
I
could
feel
have
like
bought many of them.
many.
Yeah, many.
Well, I have to say, I'm so happy that you had a vacation. You were missed terribly. Greg did a great job,
That's what I've heard. I knew he would.
but that doesn't mean that I didn't miss you a lot. And there was it was so funny because there's certain topics that I feel like I had to save until you got back, including, did you know? Because I know how big of a fan you are of The Bachelor. The Golden Bachelor is starting, and they did indeed. The lowest age of any of the women is 60.
Oh,
So it's
yeah.
it's higher than you thought it was going to be. You said it was going to be like 45-year-olds. I was like, I'm going to wait until she's back to broach this topic.
Okay. I still think that they are not going to grab their average 60-year-old woman.
Well,
I mean,
he's
you've
not the
seen them.
average 60-year-old,
Well,
70-year-old man. Have you seen him?
yes, and that's the whole point. They're still going to be the most beautiful of the 60-year-old people.
It's television.
And I know. I know.
But speaking of which, I do have, can I tease you a little bit?
Sure.
So I listened. I obviously was gone yesterday. Thank you, Joe Zepecki, for covering. Um, but I got to listen to the whole show. He did a great job. You did a
Yeah, he
great job.
did.
And you guys also started catching up with you and your trip. And while you were out, one of the things Greg and I joked about was how much this trip might reinvent you and you may come back not cynical.
Ha!
And so the fact that you were like, you gave about 2 seconds to how good the trip was, and then you just immediately started complaining about the airplane. I was like, nope, she's still the same person.
Pretty much. That's really funny. Although I will say, Kristen, that the airplane stuff aside, every time I travel, I feel better about humans, which
Interesting.
you
Say more
which
about
you wouldn't
that.
yeah, which you wouldn't think would necessarily happen, but every time we travel, I am just reminded of how much we are similar.
Hmm.
We want the same things. We want a place to live. We like good food. We like to laugh. And so that always makes me feel better because even with some of the staff that worked at our resort, and I told Louisa the night before we left, and I got all emotional, and I said, we would be friends. I know we would be friends because it's just those kinds of connections. And I think that's what is so important about traveling,
I totally agree. I
you
think, well,
know?
it's also it's the little things like we talk about of the importance of not replacing every checkout with a computer because of the small talk you can make with your community and your neighbors when you're picking up groceries, or all the little things of when you actually put yourself out there to have in-person conversations. And certainly it's underlined when you're traveling because it's like you're in a new place, you're experiencing new things, it's a different culture, and yet it's all the same.
Yeah,
And so I totally agree with you on that. And so happy that you're happy to be home.
I am. It's always good to be home and sleep in your own bed. And I'm very particular about my pillow. So it's always easier I think, to sleep in your own bed.
All right. Well, I can't wait to embrace you. Hopefully the studio will be on tomorrow, so I'll be back in studio tomorrow, but we have a very fun packed show today. It's Tuesday, so Dan Shafer is going to be here at the bottom of the 10 o'clock hour. He'll be here at 10:30, and we're going to talk impeachment because I feel like we're going to talk about this every single day because it's that important. But also any updates on Meagan Wolfe and whether or not I feel like these are two similar stories as far
Oh,
as
yeah.
the complexity of can they do that? Because it seems like they can't, and yet
And that yet they do.
And yet they do.
Yeah.
So we'll talk to Dan at 10:30. And then in the next hour, this weekend, the Willie Street Fair is this weekend.
That's a
It's a big
that's a
deal.
big it's a really big deal.
It's Madison's longest running neighborhood gathering. And so Colleen Hayes is going to be here to talk about that. We're also going to be talking to Sandy Peters, who is a Waukesha woman who is organizing a walk run for this weekend that is going to be raising funds for Dig Deep, which is about providing water and like filling the water gap to places where they don't have access to clean, drinkable water, which
And
we
and
take for granted.
this is in America.
Oh, yeah.
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 This is happening in America. People don't have access to clean, drinkable water.
Well, and I think it's such a poignant timing that they're doing this fundraiser in Waukesha this weekend, because I think it's within the last 5 days the Waukesha pipeline turned on, and about 2 weeks ago, last week of August, we had Dan Dukniak on, who we talked about this project and how long it's been running and stuff. And the truth of the matter is, the city of Waukesha residents, the cost of their water is going to go up. But he kind of ended it. It was like being able to afford and have access to clean water, and how many millions of people don't even have that. And so I feel like it's maybe a good reminder for the community that there's a lot of people who don't have enough water, as we let our shower run until it heats up, and all of the things that we take for granted when it comes to clean, drinkable water. But where I want to start is the wild. Do you feel guilty? This is my question. Do you feel guilty about what happened to Aaron Rodgers last night? And I'm not laughing. I'm laughing out of it's so uncomfortable, because I think we talked about it a month or so ago. We're like, should we stop talking about Aaron Rodgers? And people called in about their feelings about him. And I think most Packers fans have very mixed feelings about Aaron Rodgers and him leaving the Packers in the way that he did, him joining the Jets, him taking a pay cut, the Hard Knocks thing, even his interview with John McEnroe that kicked off the game last night. You know, he kind of referenced being a massive fish in a tiny little goldfish bowl as the difference of living in Green Bay. And he's sounding, because he's one of the best to ever did.
We're losing you a little bit there.
Okay.
You're a little sticky.
Better now?
Better now.
Okay. And so even up until literally the moment of his first snap, there was feelings of like, oh God, you're still sounding so arrogant. And so people have feelings. And yet I don't think anyone had the feeling of, oh, I hope you get potentially a career ending, if not a season ending, if not a career ending injury on your fourth snap of the season. So my question is, are you feeling any Catholic guilt this morning about Aaron Rodgers? 844-967-2789, because I certainly woke up to one text from one specific person, I think, feeling a little guilty about that, because they had hoped that he didn't have a bad season, that he wouldn't have a good season, but maybe that, but not this. And so
I would like to think that most people, even if they don't like Aaron Rodgers and how bad the breakup was, that, as you said, nobody would wish a career-ending injury on him.
No, and I don't think they would, but it's I don't know if the word is irony. I don't know, like, it's to have so much hype. Like, I don't know, this feels unprecedented as far as, having the Hard Knocks season start with be focused on the Jets. There's so much hype around Aaron Rodgers being Super Bowl contenders, everything that was going to happen with him and the Jets this year, just the Jets in general putting all of their eggs in this basket for Aaron Rodgers. And for him to literally have one attempt and basically, it was one attempt. It was four snaps, one throw, and he goes down. And it's like, you can't, that's a movie. That's like if you wrote that in a movie, they said that's too on the nose. We can't do
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. That would never happen in life, right?
And so my question is, do you feel guilty about Aaron Rodgers? 844-967-2789. That's 844-96-party on the Facebook live stream, which you are always welcome to join and watch us along with listen to us on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, which you can find at As Goes Wisconsin. Joe McClear says, none of the vaccinated quarterbacks tore their Achilles this past weekend. Checkmate, anti-vaxxers.
Ooh, Joe, bringing
And
it.
Joe,
Bringing
and
the
I
heat
know,
on Tuesday.
and I know Joe's not even a Packers fan; he's a Lions fan, so he's saying that with an extra oomph. Gosh, but I certainly feel bad. I don't think I don't want it. I didn't want him to win the Super Bowl. I was with my family over the weekend, and my brother actually was like, "I hope they win the Super Bowl." I was like, "That's a weird thing to say." I don't. And his reasoning was, I think it's kind of the fact that the Jets have always been bad, and maybe they've earned this one, and he's earned this one.
Well,
But
from what I've read, the Jets' defensive line was always in question, and
offensive line, their
offensive
offensive line
line,
is
yeah, the O
terrible.
line, and that's what made this sack possible.
Well, it's that, but then we'll also, good Aaron Rodgers' very good friend, Bakhtiari tweeted last night. So we'll read that tweet when we get back on what he has to blame for this, because he's blaming the NFL. So we will talk about that. We'll take your calls if you're feeling guilty about Aaron Rodgers this morning. And we'll also give you an update on Jack's American Pub and how that turned out for the bar. 844-967-2789. We'll be back after the break. Welcome back to As Goes Wisconsin. I am Kristen Bride. Jane Metnair is back. The tag team duo is back on the air together. Just not in the studio together today, but that's okay. I'm just sad because after today, we only have 8 more shows together. And that's if the baby doesn't come early. So
She's not coming early.
She's not coming early. She can't come early because Mike's still recovering from his back surgery. So we've already decided, baby, you got to stay put for as long as possible.
Just sit tight for 2 weeks yet. It'll all be good.
Well, we're talking about, I think, one of the most unbelievable stories. I don't know what else we could have started today with, but talking about Aaron Rodgers and being out after 4 snaps. And if you, as a Packers fan who maybe wish that he didn't have a great season, feel guilt at all, 844-967-2789, because at the commercial break, I checked, and it sounds like 18 minutes ago, they did announce that, in fact, his Achilles is torn, and the MRI has confirmed it, and he is out for the season after 4 snaps.
Wow. Nobody could have predicted this or seen this coming. And not that it requires an especially violent hit, but the one that he took didn't look that terrible.
I think everyone saw the hit. They were like, what even happened? And so this is the thing that I didn't realize. I think I've heard here and there that this is a point of contention for players in the NFL, but it comes down to AstroTurf or artificial turf. So David Bakhtiari tweeted this last night, and obviously those two are very good friends, even though Bakhtiari is still a Packer. But he's been dealing with an injury for the 2 years plus.
Right.
So he tweeted out last night, "Congrats at NFL. How many more players have to get hurt on artificial turf? You care more about soccer players than us. You plan to remove all artificial turf for the World Cup coming up. So clearly it's feasible. I'm sick of this. Do better." So he makes it sound like, because the hit looked like a normal hit.
It did.
But that the way they slip, or whatever it is specifically about artificial turf, that leads to torn Achilles, torn ACLs, and some of the injuries that we've seen sideline these guys for entire seasons. And I don't know enough about the science of that to know if that is one of the reasons why this is changing more. But it also that's an interesting point that he makes, that if they're actually they're willing to change it out to put real grass in for the World Cup and for those games, but then for the NFL, they wouldn't, especially when you think about the investment that the NFL and these teams have in their players and all the other rules that they change to protect players and their longevity, because they're worth them a lot of money.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
844-967-2789, 844-96-party. You can call and or text, do you feel guilty about Aaron Rodgers? Texter from Waukesha, I wanted him to go to Dallas and beat them next week.
Yeah. There you go.
From the 715, Rodgers lasted 1 minute and 36 seconds. Now we know why Danica, Olivia, and Shailene were so disappointed. Youch.
That is a zinger.
That
is a zinger for
that
a
is a
Tuesday
zinger.
morning. Well, I got a text from the first thing I got this morning at 6:30 a.m. from my mother. Shout out Deb Bry. Because we were all, they were home and everyone watched the game last night. Was good morning. Not a good morning for Aaron Rodgers. I have to say, I hoped he would not do well in NYC, but certainly never wanted something like this to happen. And that was kind of where I started. I was like, I was not necessarily rooting for him, but not this.
Not this, for sure.
And especially because, this was actually the most compassionate response I've seen so far is from Maggie Loney, who came on the show last year. I don't remember. I think she was the only Packer pundit, the only woman Packer pundit we had on last year. So she is, she's the podcaster for Pack a Day podcast, and she said TV, and she's great. But she tweeted this out, which I think is for sure the most compassionate. She said, Aaron Rodgers is the reason so many football fans fell in love with the sport. First ballot Hall of Famer, four-time MVP. He's one of the best to ever do it, and a huge reason I have so many incredible football memories. I truly hope that wasn't the last time I see him play football. And then she followed up with, I'm just sad, man. And I think that was kind of the similar feeling of his the end of the last season, right? We're like, whoa, was this the last time we saw him as a Packer? And that feeling of could this be the last time we saw him play? Was that play really?
Well, and I think too, people, if you didn't want him to do well, at least you wanted to see him lose fairly.
Yes. And certainly, and we're going to get to this because we don't have time to touch on it now, but certainly Jack's American Pub, which when you were out of town for all the hubbub around this, but Jack's American Pub on Brady Street in Milwaukee had that was the first night of their big special, their big promo that was a little petty, but it was about Aaron Rodgers, and it was about him playing and then playing your bar tab. And that, I think, is a super interesting story, but we're going to have to table it because when we come back, Dan Shafer is going to be here, and we're going to recombobulate on some of the top issues happening in Madison, happening in Milwaukee, happening across Wisconsin. But we'll start the 11 o'clock hour with the disappointed fans who really thought they were going to get their bar tab paid for last night. But because of, how the game ended up going last night, they did not. But there was national press there covering what was going to happen. And so that is another interesting story. But if you have more feelings on whether or not you're feeling guilty this morning about Aaron Rodgers getting hurt, or if you also feel like how the 715 texter felt, that there's some more zingers in there for you, we would love to hear from you. 844-967-2789. And also, if you have any questions for Dan Shafer, coming up, 844-96-party. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be back after this. Welcome back to As Goes Wisconsin. I'm Kristen Bry. Jay Matner is back on the board. And Dan Shafer, it's Tuesday at 10:30, so we are recombobulating with the one and only. How are you, friend?
We are recombobulating. What a day. What a day in Wisconsin to be discombobulated.
What makes you say that? What is your top things in your head right now that you're like, geez?
Well, obviously, you were talking about it before the break. The Aaron Rodgers turn of events. It's just unbelievable what happened, and just first series after all the hype, running out with the American flag with the 9/11 tribute and all that, and season's over 4 plays into it. I mean, it's just unbelievable. I mean, I've had my
Unbelievable.
issues with Rodgers over the years, but I can't help but feel for the guy and feel for the whole situation. It's just awful. It's just awful.
It really is. I mean, I think that's why I was kind of like, do you feel guilty? Because I think there were so many jokes and stuff kind of leading up to it and like, I hope you don't win this year, but not this. And so that story is crazy. Obviously, we have our own political shenanigans happening in our state. I think I checked Twitter during the break, and McCarthy's talking about impeaching Biden. Like, there's never a lack of things to talk about, is there, Dan?
No, never a lack of things to talk about. Always a need to recombobulate, that's for sure.
Whew. All right. So I guess let's start. I mean, I think this is kind of just going until this dies. Hope and knock on wood that it does die. I feel like we're going to touch on this probably almost every day on the show. I know most other shows are talking about it just because it is that undemocratic, let's say, but is the ongoing will they or won't they with impeaching Justice Janet Protasiewicz before she has heard a single case. And you recently wrote about this basically from the angle of, I think this was the title. It's outrageous and undemocratic. It's also completely predictable. And so let's talk a little bit more about why you say we should have all just seen this coming.
Yeah, I mean, for one, Dan Knodl's now state senator more or less campaigned on this he was on the same ballot in the April election that Protasiewicz was. But in addition to that, you look back to what Robin Vos and Wisconsin Republicans have been doing for the last, 5 years at least, is that they have gone out of their way to undermine and invalidate and overturn election results over the years. And that has included, after the 2018 election where Tony Evers beat Scott Walker, moving to strip powers from the governor's office, after the 2020 election, after Joe Biden defeated Donald Trump, immediately launching investigations into the validity of everything, the Gableman mess, all of that. So this is really, about what we've come to expect from Robin Vos and legislative Republicans who don't seem to be able to have a good answer, or they're not listening to the will of the people, the voices of the people that are made heard through these votes. Protasiewicz obviously won with a landslide victory in April, and I think people wanted to see change. And Robin Vos is, of all issues for him to cling to power in any way that he can, it is obviously going to be through the maps. These maps give him the power to basically run the state legislature without having to, kind of protect key seats and things like that. They have their ridiculous gerrymandered majorities, and that gives them the option to do things like launch ridiculous impeachment investigations into Janet Protasiewicz. And I think this is, just such a ridiculous move. It's undemocratic, it's outrageous, but like I said, it's nothing that it is completely predictable. It's completely in line with everything that we've been seeing from these Wisconsin Republicans over the years, especially under the leadership of Robin Vos.
And so, but there's potential that the campaign that the Wisconsin Democrats have launched, along with, I think there's plenty of just Democratic groups that are Democratic with a small d, who are like full court press on this because it is that much of a constitutional crisis. And so if you have not, I'm not sure we've talked about the website on this show yet, but defendjustice.com, you can go there and you can see literally everyone in the assembly, everyone in the state Senate, and where they stand right now, at least what they've said publicly on impeaching or not impeaching. You can look up your address so you can easily find who your reps are. And then you can easily call them and let them know how you feel about which way they would vote on this topic. So they make it super easy for you. But it sounds like there are rumblings that this amount of pressure could be working, and that while Robin Vos certainly, like we said, these gerrymandered maps are what keeps Robin Vos as our shadow governor, right? As Politico called him, what was that, 2 years ago?
Mhm.
Because it's not only that he is in a safe seat, he has that many people who are in a safe seat who he knows they have to be more loyal to him and the party than their constituents, so he can get them to do whatever he wants. And so
Mhm.
this is very personal, it seems like, for Robin Vos, and why he specifically is so against giving up any of his power.
Yeah, and I've written on a number of occasions that these gerrymandered maps are Robin Voss's skeleton key to holding on to power in the state of Wisconsin, no matter how many statewide elections that Republicans lose. You know, they've lost, Republicans and Republican-backed candidates have lost 14 of the last 17 statewide elections, but Republicans still enjoy huge majorities in the state legislature, and they have continued to consolidate power within the state legislature during Robin Voss's tenure. So it's just an outsized power and influence in that body, and it is a way for no one really to ever, it's easier for Republicans to get a supermajority than it is for Democrats to get a simple majority here in this 50-50 swing state. So, it is really ridiculous. And I think, it is just goes to show how important these maps are to Robin Vos, and that he will go to any length possible to protect them.
Dan, I had a question, and we had Representative Evan Goyke on yesterday when Joe Zepecki was here. Because Justice Janet's victory was so large and so overwhelming, is it a fair assumption that a fair amount of Republicans voted for her? And therefore, I would think this would also really tick them off.
Yeah, I think you had a lot of, obviously Democrats, but Dem-leaning independents, that those, like you said, people on the right who might want change in the state of Wisconsin, want to see some checks and balances come to Robin Vos in the Wisconsin State Legislature. And I think it is really important, like you mentioned, Kristen, the Defend Justice effort, highlighting not just what Vos is saying, because obviously you're going to interview the Assembly Speaker and see what he has to say. But this is something that every member of the Wisconsin State Legislature would have to vote on. And I think it is really important to hold every last member accountable. And so I think you're seeing a little bit from, there was a statement from State Representative Scott Johnson, who represents, I believe, an area in Jefferson County, said last week that he would not be, he's a Republican, and he said he's not supporting the impeachment effort. He said something along the lines of, I didn't vote for Janet Protasewicz, but she won. That's the results of the election, and we have to move on. And I wonder if we're going to see more of that. And I think particularly in the state Senate, where they need every last vote to be able to impeach, you get one Republican state senator who goes on the record to say, I'm not on board with this, that could really derail the effort as it is. And I think, Defend Justice eyed Appleton area State Senator Rachel Cabral Guevara as a potential swing vote here, as somebody who's leaning against impeachment. I wonder if we're going to see a few more of those, especially from people like her who are in some swingier districts, like in the Fox Valley or Western Wisconsin or suburban Milwaukee, where you have, some of those more crossover votes that are coming through. And I think, this is going to be something that people remember. This is going to be, I write a preview of all 100 and however many races are on the ballot in the Wisconsin State Legislature. I think this issue is going to be something that people remember when it comes to the state legislature. It's going to be something that people are going to know, want to know where their legislators stand on this as well.
I also just saw at the very top, Amy Bensfield from Assembly District 27th is leaning against removal as well. And so she's also a Republican. And so I think put the pressure on. Like if you voted and you don't want your vote erased, let your representative know that you are watching this. And I do think that if there's enough pressure and there's enough Republicans who are like, I can't peg my legacy to this. And it's just the fact that Robin Vos would peg his legacy to this. That is just, what is the calculus there as far as...
It's just power consolidation at all costs. That is just the guiding principle of Robin Vos, that consolidate power at all costs, and a Democrat is not allowed to govern, even if they win. Democrats should not be allowed to govern in Wisconsin. That's probably Robin Vos. He has like maybe a poster of that above his desk.
Put that on its
Democrats
tombstone.
not allowed to govern. Yeah.
And what kind of retribution can the popcorn king dish out if some assembly members do decide not to vote for impeachment?
I mean, he could remove people off of committees or things like that. But I think, didn't see any retaliation to Scott Johnson when he put that very public statement out last week. So I think that was pretty interesting. And I think the pressure is going to be on Vos with this one. To see where things stand. And I think he's playing with fire a little bit too, because I think this could backfire. If the redistricting case ultimately goes forward in the way that the litigants want it to, that means every member of the Wisconsin State Assembly and every member of the Wisconsin State Senate will be on the ballot next fall in 2024 if they do get new maps in time. So I think, Robin Vos is going to try anything he can, anything that is legally possible for him to do. They'll gin up any kind of reason that will be used to do this unprecedented action of trying to impeach a Wisconsin Supreme Court judge. So they will do anything they possibly can to keep these maps.
Well, and it still seems murky to me of like the details of how this will proceed. Because I know at one point, if she resigns now and they appoint someone this year, then that would trigger a new election in 2024. But if she waits until next year, then that person gets to do the entire term. There also yesterday was a lawsuit that's asking the state Supreme Court to block Republican lawmakers from seeking to impeach. So like how much have you been able to keep up on the details of like, can they do this? Is there any mechanism to stop them from doing this legally?
Yeah, there's so many moving parts here, and I'm trying to do my best to learn about it. But
same.
You're right. If she resigns before December 1st, it's a different scenario than if she were to resign or be removed after December 1st. That could kick in an election, either a do-over election basically for next spring, or would have to open up for the next available spring election slot when there's also not already a Wisconsin Supreme Court justice that'll be on the ballot. That I believe is not until 2031. And then there's all these different mechanisms of legal behind the scenes stuff that I went to school for political science, but I didn't go to law school, so I don't know all of these different things.
Not a Wisconsin constitutional lawyer over here. We'll talk to Matt Flynn.
But I do think that there is, this is a very, very unprecedented action, and so I do think that like the suit trying to block the impeachment, we're going to see that as well. And I think we're seeing some national interest start to turn to this case. I believe Eric Holder wrote a piece about it that was published today. So I mean, this is going to the pressure is going to be really dialed up on Robin Vos and Wisconsin Republicans on an issue that I just don't get the sense that even some of the never Trump Republican types like Jennifer Rubin or Charlie Sykes or something like that, they've all written columns already opposition to this effort. So it's not like it's just like the people like the folks from Wisconsin Institute Law and Liberty and wherever else that are just doing all these ridiculous gymnastics to try and support this effort, even though they've spoken out against them in the past. So but again, it's just that they know that the maps are the key to everything. So I think it's such a big deal.
Well, in another case of can they do that, we'll talk about Meagan Wolfe and what's the update there as far as can they just remove her? I don't know, but we'll talk about that when we come back. There's also a little news about the domes. Maybe we'll talk more Packers. We got a lot to try to fit in with the 8 more minutes with Dan Shafer from the recombobulation area when we come back. Stay tuned. This is As Goes Wisconsin. Welcome back to As Goes Wisconsin. I am Kristen Bry. We got Jane Matnair back on the board and Dan Shafer here to recombobulate as we typically do on Tuesdays from 10:30 to 11. So we spent the last segment talking about the ongoing what will happen with the potential impeachment of Janet Protasewicz. And there is another official that Republicans are trying to get rid of, despite the fact that under the same rules, they had no problem with their guy staying on because he wouldn't leave. But when it comes to the person they're trying to get rid of, they're just going to bulldoze right over that. So yesterday, the Wisconsin Senate Committee cleared the path for Meagan Wolfe, who is Wisconsin's chief elections administrator, to be fired, despite the fact that when Fred Pren didn't step down from the DNR board, they were perfectly fine not forcing a vote to have him step down. So how much have you followed this, Dan? And how much, I mean, this is another thing that's just going to end up in court, right? Because Josh Call, and basically legally, they're saying with how the Supreme Court ruled on Fred Pren, they can't do this.
Yeah, I haven't been following this as much as the impeachment issue, but
Okay.
I've certainly been paying attention to it. It just seems, but I think, we could talk about all the different mechanisms of what they're doing and the staying on the commission that they're appointed to and the hypocrisy of all of it. But I think so much of the, push to fire Meagan Wolfe as the head of the Wisconsin Elections Commission, it just goes back to the 2020 election conspiracies, right? It's just another, red meat move to the election deniers that make up such a huge part of the Republican Party's base. I know that there were a bunch of, kind of prominent election deniers that were, put on the stand in the Assembly Committee's hearing or the Senate Committee's hearing talking about this. It's just these people who are just completely off the deep end about the 2020 election. I think, Gableman was there making some other people look sane by comparison, considering who else was on that committee. And I think, again, it doesn't matter, just the same, not unlike the impeachment push. It doesn't matter what the reason is for wanting to fire her. They're just going to, what the technical reason is for wanting to get rid of her, they're just going to make something up. They're just going to find something, just the same, a lot of people are saying like, oh, why are you covering impeachment when you has to be a corruption charge? Well, they're just going to invent one, just like they're doing with Meagan Wolfe. I mean, don't you think it's much the same type of behavior and approach that we're seeing from Wisconsin Republicans?
Totally. Well, it's also, but I still love the two things can be true. Don't forget to bank your vote, and don't forget to vote early this year, you Republicans. But yes, the 2020 election was totally corrupt, and because they voted early, and so it's like, okay, I guess the mental gymnastics of Simone Biles is what we're doing today.
Yeah, it's ridiculous, and it's just they're going to keep trying to meddle with the election administration in the state, running up to local elections next year, primaries, everything with 2024. It's just a sign of it's just the latest of what's happening and a sign of what's to come. It's just like this ridiculous approach to governing where somebody, and I think Wolfe has garnered the support of almost all of the other members of the Wisconsin Elections Commission. It's just the one guy who was literally one of the fake electors, Bob Spindell, who's voting, against her. Everybody else on that commission, even those appointed by Republicans, seem to be in favor of the way that she operates. So,
Well, I want to, Jane, you said that we have a good text that we wanted to read.
We do. John from the Falls checking in at 844-967-2789. I think it would be helpful for Dan to remind everyone the powers that were limited by the Republicans when Tony Evers won his election.
Appointment powers is one of the main pieces of it, right? I mean, and that goes to all of the different issues that we've been talking about here, doesn't it?
Yeah. And so before we let you go, I want to make sure that we touch on, because you are tracking all of the stuff with the childcare counts compared to what the GOP bills have been. Now, I know last week there were hearings on those GOP-backed bills. It sounded like, at least the coverage I read from those hearings, that there was some consideration of childcare providers were like, yes, this might make things a little bit more flexible, but none of this is getting at the root cause. So what have you heard as far as opposition or support on those bills?
Yeah, it's interesting because we have, all this nonsense with impeachment talks and firing election administrations. We have some real things that we need to deal with in this state. Childcare being one of them. Obviously, the governor called this special session. That'll happen next week. But the Republicans are set to, kind of move some bills through committee last week and could, as soon as Thursday, vote on those bills. And they have not exactly had a warm reception from those in the childcare community. One of the people who testified on those bills, Corrine Hendrickson, she is the co-founder of We Can, owner and operator of Little Explorers Family Childcare in New Glarus. She said, and I quote, "I am opposing all the assembly bills that purport to solve the childcare crisis. It is clear you are fabricating a reason in order to justify your lack of responsiveness in listening to your constituents who overwhelmingly told you to vote yes for childcare accounts." So these bills, providers have talked about, growing ratios of providers to children, loosening restrictions on various things, including age restrictions on how providers, making it easier for 16-year-olds to provide childcare. And this has been met with a really negative response from a lot of the people in the childcare community. I know one person that was quoted in a CBS 58 story talked about how this will make more people want to quit the profession.
Yeah.
So if the Republicans' goal is to try to get more people to want to quit the profession, please, by all means, go forward with this ridiculous package of bills and continue to ignore childcare accounts. But I think, these bills are ridiculous. And I think part of what Wisconsin Republicans are doing in the news this week is just try to distract from how unpopular these are in advance of the governor's special session, which has, paid family leave, all these other workforce conditions attached to it. And, all indications that they're going to gavel in and gavel out once again. And so vote on these bills this Thursday. I think it'll be a really contentious final vote for those, especially with the special session that would be less than a week away.
Well, the special session is a week from tomorrow, so we will talk to you a week from today, preview that and any votes that come down, any other changing craziness that happens in our state. I'm sure there will be something, but Dan Shafer, founder, editor of the Recombobulation Area, don't forget to subscribe. Thank you as always, friend. We'll see you next week.
Thanks for having me.